victim, but rather a situation where a whole group, a class or also a youth group is involved. The bullying activities are being watched by others. And in a lot of cases, it is the open or silent approval of the others which encourages a bully to continue. So he is in the center of attention and doesn't get any criticism. An intervention that leads to the withdrawal of support for the offender by the bystanders or the silent students can stop the bullying. So the idea is to not only work with a child that is the bully, the wrongdoer, but with a whole group that is somehow involved. So the NBA represents a systemic approach involving several members of a group or a class in a change process. It is future and resource oriented, doesn't look back, and doesn't analyze reasons for behavior pattern, which is also a very special idea. But in this case, there is also a reason behind it so that the students who are bullying don't come up with any kind of justifications or explanations. So it tries to create a setting which enables looking for solutions. The attitude of a teacher is to initiate a change in behavior. The bully will not be confronted with his wrongdoing, no blame, this is where the name comes from, but he or she will be integrated into a group process to improve the situation for the victim and to stop bullying. Now I'm moving to the next slide. And here are the characteristics again in a nutshell. So first of all, it is important that it is a guideline for pedagogues, for adults who are working with groups and children of youth. As mentioned before, it's a systemic approach, meaning we look at the whole system, and system in this context means a group as an existing system. It focuses on solutions. It is carrying a future orientation, and it is focusing on future relationship, which in itself is understandable because especially in a class, children are supposed to work together to cooperate somehow for a longer period of time. It works without blame and punishment in order to enable the change, and no reappraisal of the past means not looking back and looking for any kind of explanations. It focuses on communication and on group dynamics. It is based on the belief in the possibility to change to the better, meaning also children who are showing a really bad kind of behavior, that there is something inside that they can change to the better, and is resource oriented, and it offers a perspective also for the offender. And this is one of the deciding principles, because this is also one of the motives that offenders are changing behaviors. Now, I wanted to also point out the definition of bullying, because not every conflict, not every quarrel, not having different opinions is comparable with bullying. I don't know how it is in your country, but what I've heard in German schoolyards very often is that children start, or they use the accusation that somebody is bullying somebody else very fast. And it is important to differentiate when is it just a quarrel or when are we talking about bullying. So there are 6 characteristics for the so-called traditional bullying. It aims at systematically humiliating someone. So it's not only once, there's a system behind it, often well thought through. It includes every form of aggressive behavior, verbal, physical, material damage. We will later on talk about what it means when you talk about cyberbullying. it takes place repeatedly and over an extended period of time, meaning it's not once. It can go on for weeks or months. It is characterized by an extreme power imbalance. And as you can imagine, if an affected child has a feeling that a whole group is against it or that the others don't care, there is an extreme power imbalance. It's a group phenomenon because they are bystanders, they are colluders, there are people just watching it, maybe also because they're happy that they are not in the center of attention, and it leaves the affected student hardly a chance to escape the situation. Then we will move on to the definition of cyberbullying, which is getting really worse during the last years. So it means to intentionally insult, threaten, or show up someone via the internet or mobile services. It can be for a longer period of time or once, but with a heavy impact. And this is a certain a difference in comparison to the so-called conventional bullying. One picture in the internet is enough to really harm a student or a child, but we have to be also look at other age groups. It also has heavy impacts on adults. It is, again, the imbalance of power between the bully and the victim. And when you look at the cyberbullying aspect, it's worse. And here, the victim can hardly defend himself or herself. Is the same. It's the same claim, but it's another dimension. So cyberbullying is actually worse than the so-called conventional bullying. So let's be clear about the definition, because sometimes the term bullying is used like inflationary. So we need to be very clear, when are we talking about bullying and when are we talking about quarreling. And what is also important, because some schools have so-called peer mediation programs where students help other students to solve a problem. A bullying case is not a case for peer mediation. It needs an adult. We heard in the introductory words, we already heard about terrible, terrible effects of cyberbullying. Generally, students reported in a survey that has been done by a German health insurance company and a foundation for several years, repeated studies. They talked about depressed mood, the drop in performance at school, the student misses classes, there are concentration problems, fears, anger, inner closure, headaches, other kinds of pain, and withdrawal in his or her own world. So also these effects already are heavy on the mental health of a student. So the question that also came up when we look at this phenomenon, why do students not defend themselves? And here again, students have been asked during surveys. So there are a couple of aspects that play a role here. So one aspect is they are afraid that things can get worse, because if an adult gets involved once but doesn't really solve a situation, then there might also be the effect of revenge. They are afraid that the adult help is not functioning, as I said before. They are also full of shame. Why does this happen to me? That's an aspect we also have to consider. Then, turning this around, victims are told that they deserve it. And bullies defend themselves by arguing that it's his or her own fault. So, on the other hand, on one side, there is this inner attitude, maybe I deserve it. And this is again, this is also coming from the side of the bullies. So this is a vicious circle. The victim is overwhelmed because the net never forgets and is constantly facing humiliating negative comments. As I said before, cyberbullying usually has a much harder effect on the individual than the so-called traditional bullying. Now, when we look at the so-called bullying system, we can recognize that there is an inner circle. So it's a closed system. There are the protagonists, the bullied child, the wrongdoers, the colluders, those who are supporting the bully, and the observers. And this slide just shows that the no blame is based on the idea that it needs an intervention from outside, but the intervention from outside is not only focusing on the two individuals, but on the whole system. So I will skip the first paragraph, which I already explained. So in this approach, bullying will not be regarded from the perspective of the offender and the victim, but rather from a systemic approach to change the dynamic between these different actors. This means that representatives of the class will be in the focus, including the bullies, not only the bully or bullies, but different representatives of a class, including colluders and observers, as well as the affected student, because bullying is a group phenomenon. And now I will start explaining the 3 steps of the process. Here you will see, or you see an overview. The first step, I will just briefly mention the steps, sorry, and then explain it more in detail afterwards. So the first step is the pedagogue talks to the bullied student or child. This means that he or she has to be either noticed it herself or himself, or it has been reported, maybe by the parents, maybe by other students. We don't know. We assume that the pedagogue knows about it and then has an individual talk with a bullied student in a safe place, in a closed room, not somewhere in the hallway in the school, but in a safe place. Then the second step would be the pedagogue forms a support group. And here we already come to one of the framings of a no blame. The group that will be formed is called a support group. Why support? I will explain this later to you. So, and this support group is including bullying protagonists and colluders, half of them, and the other half will be respected students or maybe even friends of a victim. So we have a mixed group, we have different representatives of a group. The goal of a support group is to develop ideas and measures to improve the situation of the affected student and to put the ideas and measures into practice. This will take a couple of like 2 weeks or something in order to realize this. Again, I will explain it more in detail in the next slides. Then the third step are so-called follow-up meetings. Obviously, the meetings are started with the affected student, with the victim, whether or not he or she is doing better, whether or not things have changed. And then there will be meetings with the participants of a support group, and these meetings will be individually, not with a group as a whole. So this is the overview, and now let's have a look at the details. So, as mentioned before, firstly, the teacher or pedagogue meets with the affected child in order to win his or her trust and his or her agreement to intervene. This meeting is crucial. The teacher should not only show concern about what is happening, but also show his or her commitment to help and the confidence that the problem can be solved. The child during this meeting will be informed about the planned steps. In order to form the support group, the teacher or pedagogue asks the names of friends and of classmates who are still supportive. On the other hand, he or she also asks who's bothering the affected student, so the offender, the bully, and the bystanders. And let me underline, this first meeting is very important. So what is important to consider is the adult, the teacher who is described here should be a person the student trusts. It should be somebody the student already knows, has a good relationship to. So the approach can also build on this kind of trust. The teacher and the pedagogue should convey a lot of confidence that the situation can be solved. So the goal of this meeting is not, and here again, you might be surprised to find out in detail what happened to the student. It's not about like listening to the whole story of suffering, but to give him, or it is also not about to give him or her advice concerning possible changes of behavior. This is something that we have sometimes observed in schools before, that there's a tendency also to give advice to the victim, what he or she should change. No, we accept the victim. It is also not about reflecting possible reasons why he or she is affected. This just leads into the wrong direction. Remember, from the beginning, we said it's solution oriented. And so the steps will not include a long reflection of the history, but it will focus on finding ways, finding or developing ideas how to improve the situation. So you see, the meeting is not that long. Here it says approximately 30 minutes, which is more or less reality. The child should be relieved of any responsibility. So it's not on the shoulders of the child. The teacher, pedagogue signals his or her commitment. A date for a follow-up meeting will be found within, while here it says 8 to 14 days, I'd rather say 14 days. And until then, the child observes carefully what happens. So again, I want to underline, this is functioning when there is some kind of a trust basis between the teacher, the pedagogue, and the child. So the teacher will make sure I'm taking care of this. I don't accept what is going on with you, and I want to change it to the better. Then the next big step, and again here it takes the competences of a teacher. It takes the competences of somebody who is in a good relationship to his students, her students, and knows them very well. So the teacher forms a so-called support group. This includes 3 to 4 bullying protagonists plus 3 to 4 friends of the affected child, or at least neutral students. Remember, before, the teacher asked the affected student who are, or asked for the names of these different types of students. The group's unique factor is that it is not a support group for the affected child. Again, you might be surprised, but for the teacher and pedagogue who asks for help to solve the bullying problem. So when you conduct this, or when this meeting is conducted, the teacher explains that he or she noticed that there's a child in the class which has a lot of problems, and whatever has been observed, and he or she considers it to be her problem. So she or she asks for the support to solve her or his problem. So the support group aims at developing ideas and measures which can be carried out by members of a group to stop bullying activities. This meeting also takes place in a closed setting, in a safe place, not somewhere on the schoolyard or somewhere in the hallway. It needs concentration, it needs the full attention, and it needs a closed door. So the meeting with the support group will take place during regular classes, and you can probably imagine why this is the case, so that nobody complains that he or she has to do an extra hour. The students will be invited. The purpose of the meeting will not be mentioned, just the need for solving a problem together. And obviously, the teacher has to be in contact with the other teachers before, so that these students are allowed to leave class. So initially, the teacher expresses his or her deep concern about the fact that one of the students is being bullied, and clarifies that this is an unacceptable situation which needs to be changed. He or she shows an appreciative attitude towards all participants without blaming anybody. So again, imagine a situation, you have 8 students sitting there, you have the adult, the teacher who knows the children or the juveniles, and he or she is not working with an accusation, but is rather saying that there is a situation he or she can't accept, it needs to be changed, and the teacher needs the support of this group, especially this group, in order to improve the situation for the affected child. This is, in a way, paradox, I know it, and we can later on discuss it. Nevertheless, as I said, that this approach is working a lot with group dynamics, this is exactly the effect that it can have. When the teacher asks for support to change or improve the situation for the bullied child, and is asking for ideas how to support this child, to develop activities together, to take the student, to invite the student, play together, whatever, according to the age, then a group dynamic develops where the children or the youth think about activities together with the bullied child. And when it comes to the wrongdoers, to the bully, it is enough that they declare, we will stop bullying. We won't repeat it. I think that I have already included some of this. So, as I said before, it is a closed setting, a group of students. The focus is ideas how to support the affected child. Then the teacher asks for ideas, whatever is age appropriate. They play together, they go out together, whatever. They provide the person with homework or support, assist with homework, spending time, inviting for birthdays, and the bully declares that he or she will stop the bullying. That's enough. That's sufficient. Then finally, obviously, the teacher thanks the students for their constructive ideas and support, and finds a date for follow-up meetings. Now, let me add, obviously, the children who are sitting there know exactly what it is all about. Even if a teacher is not blaming anybody, the children obviously know the reason behind it. And obviously, this might also come up in a discussion. Again, the teacher will acknowledge with this, will say yes, and this is why we're sitting here. And from now on, I want things to change. Let's focus on the future. Let's focus on a solution. You see the kind of attitude. Then, thirdly, follow-up meetings with the affected student, as already mentioned, and the members of a support group will take place 8 to 14 days later, rather 14 days. The teacher talks to the affected student in order to find out whether any positive changes occurred and how he or she is doing. Now, obviously, hearing whether these activities have also been practiced. If the answers are positive, the bullying has stopped and the classmates are friendly and supportive, the no blame approach was successful. The teacher will thank the student for the trust and invite him or her to turn to him in case of difficulties. Sorry. There will also be individual meeting with the group members to evaluate the situations. Have the students been able to put their ideas into practice? However, if the bullying continues, the teacher will announce a second meeting with the support group and assure the affected student that he or she will continue to take care of the problem. And honestly, if a second support group and the time afterwards is not changing the situation to the better for the affected child, then obviously the bullying won't be ignored. Then obviously other steps are taken. And this can, I assume that this might be similar. There can be a conference with the bully or several bullies. The parents can be invited. So all of these kind of measures can be taken. It won't be ignored. Finally, I wanted to share an idea which has been quite or become quite popular here in Germany. It's called Love Storm. Since the effects of cyberbullying are so incredibly negative and awful, terrible, the idea came up that things can also be turned around. Instead of sending nasty comments, instead of sending horrible comments, you can also send positive comments as a positive intervention. So if there is a picture, whatever kind of attack, instead of repeating negative comments, you might also come up with a supportive sentence. So this idea is called Love Storm. And yeah, that's a little figure, an emotional monster figure. I'm using a lot in my trainings with students, but also with adults. So showing a positive attitude, a grateful attitude, and also showing positive emotions. Okay. Thank you for your attention. I'm convinced that there will be lots of questions because what you just heard was a brief overview. I'm convinced that you might have lots of questions and I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you very much for the presentation and for introduction of a new point of view into such a difficult topic of bullying. When we speak about this approach, I have to say that I was quite surprised by this new and quite innovative way of solving this issue. And maybe the first question I would like to ask is, what is the most common victim of bullying? Could you characterize such a victim?
Well, actually, there is no typical victim. bullying, what I can say is that bullying occurs mostly in the ages between the fifth and the ninth grade. So, but that's another answer. This is not what you were asking for. From what we have seen in our no blame courses, there is not a typical character or individual wearing the wrong clothes or whatever, maybe not having a good haircut or these kind of things. From our experience, anybody can become a victim of bullying. It also depends whether or not the students might be in some kind of a crisis or maybe not doing that well. So some students are there who really take things to their heart, and others can just ignore it. So the answer is quite, it's not that clear from our observations, depending on the psychological strength, also on the support in the class. A lot of students can become victims.
I can see that the questions are popping up, so I would like to cheer you up or ask questions. Before I move to questions, what should perhaps parents pay attention to, especially in regards to their child or student, or perhaps pedagogues when they may suspect that they have become a victim of bullying?
Yeah, I think that's a very important question. I mean, parents will notice when the child is in a sad mood, withdraws, or maybe also performance in school drops. All of these parents are the first ones to notice it. So obviously, parents should try to talk to their children, try to find out what is behind it. And often, well, as I said, sometimes children are hesitant to talk to the parents, but there are also other examples where when a parent asks about it, that they are able to express it. So it's very important to have an open ear, to be observant, and especially when performance in school drops, not only to put pressure on the child, but also ask whether something is in the background, whether something is bullying the child. When it comes to teachers, with teachers, obviously, they have to take care of a whole class. So it's not only one individual, but also teachers will notice differences. Teachers might notice when a child or a juvenile is often missing. I mean, with and calling in sick, or when performance drops, or when other behavior patterns, like a child that was normally really in a good mood, might not is sad or not talking to the others. There's another indicator that sometimes bullied children try to stay very close, the younger ones try to stay very close to teachers in order to avoid the situations where they are alone during the break with the other youngsters. So there are a couple of indicators, and I think it has also a lot to do with a good relationship with the whole class, so that teachers are attentive and aware when something happens.
I can imagine that it may be a bit more difficult in a case of cyberbullying, right? When because it happens online, and it's not exactly it's not possible to moderate everything and to observe it completely. For me, it was interesting to read about a French case where after a suicide of 13 years old girl, they made more strict laws in a quite drastic manner compared to the former law. and currently the perpetrator can receive a sentence of 10 years in prison and a fine of 100,000 euros in case when a child takes their own life. Are
Yeah.
there cases of more strict laws after, let's say, more difficult case after, let's say, suicide? Do you happen of do you happen to know of something like that? Let's say that a cyberbullying case has caused stricter laws. Do you remember such case?
When I talk about Germany, actually, our laws are not as strict as in France, but in France, this has just been a recent development because of an actual case only a couple of weeks ago. In Germany, schools are forced, when it comes to cyberbullying, they are even forced to talk to the authorities, to also include police. But the punishment itself, the sentence, is not as harsh as in France. And again, schools, when they, even if they have to talk to the police, when they say that they would like to work on it with a pedagogical approach in order to stop or to change the situation, this is well regarded. This is appreciated. Obviously, somebody who really, in a really bad case, I have not heard about a suicide here, but in a really bad case, the student will also face legal consequences, obviously, yeah. When it's too bad. And nevertheless, we try to work earlier. We try to start on a lower level.
My question to you about this would be this. Is it possible to prevent cyberbullying? To avoid it?
Yeah. Well, this is what we are trying to do in our projects. We are trying to